AskReddit by stranger to me. What's a small act of kindness you were once shown that you'll never forget? Neighbors asked to borrow my truck. Told them I could not trust my truck because the tires were bad. Next day my neighbor called and said he was getting new tires for his Suburban and I could have his old ones. Told me to just show up at this certain tire shop and they would put them on. Get to tire shop and they put on brand new Goodyear tires. I asked what happened to the old tires I was supposed to receive. Shop owner said the old tires was just a story to get me in the shop. My neighbor bought me a full set of new tires instead of the old tires he said I could have. I guess they can borrow the truck anytime after that. D. Riding my bike on a long trip through Canada. With about 50 miles to go, I had a major mechanical failure. Stuck on the side of the road in a foreign country. Within 5 minutes at least 10 cars had stopped to check on me. One guy loaded my bike in the back of his truck and drove me 30 miles to the border where I could catch a ferry back to the US. Amazing kindness and generosity toward a stranger. He just asked that I pay it forward, and to date I've helped 5 cyclists who were broken down in honor of that promise. Canadians are so nice, they don't want anything in return, just pay it forward. I was given access to a shower and a hot meal after being homeless for 9 months. I've been saving hotel soaps from my work trips to help someone or maybe a few someones in my community. I was 9 years old, waiting for the school bus in Wisconsin winter. I had a thin coat, no hat or gloves. A woman driving past saw me and stopped, giving me a blanket from the back of her car. It was a long skinny one, so she wrapped it around my head and shoulders like a big scarf. I remember thanking her, but being confused. I told her I didn't know how I would give it back when I was done borrowing it. She hugged me and said not to worry. I still have that blanket. I love that you still have the blanket. Alternator died while I was driving home from university. Engine died as I exited the freeway in the middle of the night in a not so pleasant part of town in the days before cell phones. As I'm pushing my car out of the intersection, a guy in a truck comes up and offers to push my car to my neighborhood a good 3 miles away. He does so, and I'm pulling into my neighborhood. He simply gives a wave and drives off into the night. I never even had a chance to thank him. Ones like this always get me a little more. Where the person is very obviously just doing it to be a good person, so much so they don't even let you say thanks. I took my sister who's in a wheelchair to the cinema for the first time on my own. At the end, I realized I could undo the brakes and was blocking everyone. I felt like crying because I thought everyone was pissed at me, but some nice lady helped me, then took me and my sister out. She said she once had a son who needed a wheelchair. This was long ago, but I'll never forget. Once had a son, ouch. I was out of a job at a time that I had to support my mother. Finally landed one, but I had to walk back and forth and I didn't have any shoes that would hold up on the walk or the work. Went to FB and mom asked around for some hand-me-downs we could buy from someone. A day later a very kind man showed up with a brand new pair of really nice shoes he had just gone out and bought for me. He left before I could even get any money for him. I cried. Sometimes the hero is the one who asks. A friend of mine has a son who was dating a girl with a really bad home life. She broke down at their house once because she started her period and couldn't afford tampons that month. My friend found out she only had one pair of shoes that were falling apart, one pair of jeans she wore every day, and a few hoodies. The girl was my size, so I passed down a few pairs of Nike shoes I'd never worn, a couple of Lush bath bombs and gift cards to Belk and JCPenney. My friend took her to the mall, said she only bought underwear and bras since she barely had any that fit. It meant nothing to me since it was all stuff I had around my house, but everything to that girl. There were about 6 of us that dropped off stuff for the girl, who said it was more than she'd ever owned in her life. My gym teacher purchased me lunch in 3rd grade after I dropped mine. I'm 34 years old and still remember this. My gym teacher embarrassed me in front of the entire grade. I, too, still remember this. I recorded a homemade album with my garage band in high school and handed out a few CDs. A few weeks later my English teacher approached me with 5 pages of notes on what he liked and what I could improve on. He apparently got the CD from someone at the high school and listened to it all the way through. It was over an hour long. He didn't know I was the singer and guitar player until he asked the person who gave him the CD. He said that if I ever got a shot in a studio, I would create something amazing. Thank you to all the teachers out there who believe in their students. It makes all the difference to some of us. Your English teacher is amazing. Good for you. During the single most difficult time of my life, a stranger on Reddit gifted me $500. To me, it was a fortune. I received it while at work and just broke down. It started the change of my life, and a few months later I was able to move, met my now fiancé, had my son, and found my job. I still message them once in a while to update them on my life and continue to thank them for their generosity, but I think they abandoned their account years ago. Edit, you all have inspired me to write them another message. It's been a while. And a shout out to everyone who has or wants to do something similar. I hope you understand how earth-shattering, in the best way possible, those kind of gifts can be. Well damn, paging you that Redditor. At work I was complaining about heartburn once. I was still pretty new to the job. Didn't really have any work friends. Felt like an outsider. My life outside of work was pretty shit as well. The bartender on shift overheard me and ran to a nearby coffee shop to get me a chocolate milk. It definitely made the heartburn go away, but it was such a needlessly kind act. I don't think you'll ever forget it. 2 years later we're still friends and she is definitely one of the kindest people I've ever met. Wow, the last part made me smile. That's so lovely to hear. Some people are just so lovely, aren't they? I literally coasted into a gas station out of gas on my motorcycle, then realized I didn't have my wallet. Some lady saw me patting all my pockets and that I was upset and offered to fill up my tank. I only let her put $5 in, which on a bike is a lot. But it meant so much to me. I ran out of petrol on my 125 not long after I started riding. Didn't realize I'd go through my reserve as fast as I did. I managed to get a few more miles down the road by laying the bike on its left side to get a few more drops into the carb, but eventually it wouldn't work anymore. I was about to start pushing when a guy pulled up next to me and said no fuel. I said yes and he told me to wait. About 10 minutes later he came back with a jerry can of petrol and poured it in, but before I could offer him anything he said happens to the best of us and drove off. I assume he was a biker too and had the same happen to him once. He saved me the trouble of pushing the bike or getting recovered. I wish I knew who he was so I could repay him. Deleted. This makes me feel so old, but when I used to play softball and we'd travel to the big regional or national tournaments, we'd get these enamel pins made of something that represented our team or city or whatever really and trade them with other teams. I loved it. It was so sweet to see these girls from across the US, and sometimes beyond, collecting these pins and learning about new places. I also remember showing these pins to some of my school friends who did not play softball and they were way less than impressed, lol. I was bullied a lot as a kid. There were 3 boys in the neighborhood who were always really mean to me. Well, there was a new kid who had just moved in, like half the size of the neighbor boys, and he already had a target on his back because he was very flamboyant. Well, one day the boys were picking on me, and this kid, it was the first time anyone ever stood up for me, and man, he got pissed. He got his ass kicked. I felt terrible, but he was super happy about it afterwards. I wish I remembered his last name. I hope he has an amazing life. I have 2 moments that I'll never forget. When I was younger, my mum was depressed and we had very little money. It was either eating or eating a lot. An old lady around the corner from us would invite us over 40 sometimes or breakfast before school. She knitted me, my baby sister and my mum cardigans, socks and a blanket each one winter when it was really bad. I was at a terrible time of my life at 17, had a bad day at work, and then my train home was 1 hour plus late. I just started crying at the train station and was really wondering if it was all worth it. A woman just held me for a bit while I cried. She was a complete stranger. I've never seen her since, but I needed her, I guess. I think she saved my life that day. Hope you and your mom are all doing much better these days. Choking to death on a roadside and a nice guy stopped and did the Heimlich on me. Thanks bro. Edit. More details for those asking. Leaving a park with my son. Put a hard candy in my mouth. Said something to my son. Candy slipped down my throat. Immediately knew I was fucked. Couldn't get air. Threw the car in park. Left my son wondering WTF. Started flagging down people on street. Guy and his girl stopped. Shit started to go dark. Made universal choking sign. Guy understood. I could tell he wasn't sure what to do, so I guided his hands to correct position. After 4 or so heaves the candy popped out. I gave him a big hug and we went our ways. Scariest moment of my life, not dying per se, but dying in front of my son. Holy shit, choking is one of my worst fears. You were so lucky that guy knew what to do. I was around 6 years old and went out to ride my bike. My parents were behind me walking and I was going ahead and coming back to them every 5-10 minutes, but I forgot to turn around and realized I am lost, so I started crying after some unsuccessful attempts to find them. One kind man probably in his 60s stopped and asked me multiple questions about what happened and who were my parents. It turned out that he knew my grandpa. He contacted him, got my parents' numbers and called them. They decided where to meet and after 20 minutes we were there. I was so happy and relived and thanked the old man. He lives in the block of flats as my grandpa and I sometimes help him by carrying the groceries or fixing something in his house. I would never forget this act, because things could have gone wrong for me. Now you have a friend for years and memories for a lifetime. I was bullied in elementary school and an older boy defended me. He became my first crush and I still remember him. Wholesome AF. Deleted. This is so heartwarming. That's such a nice thing to do. I was at a concert and a couple behind me gave me a VIP pass to get a picture with the artist because their friend couldn't come. Never will forget it. Whoa, talk about generosity. Damn, that's generous. When I was 10 plus played Little League. When the team won a game, everyone would go to the dairy barn for an ice cream cone to celebrate. Had an artsy coach one year who determined that if you didn't play in the game, you didn't get an ice cream. I didn't play one game that we won. I wasn't very good anyway, but still I went to the dairy barn just to hang with my friends. Others usually went home. The lady server asked me what I wanted and I told her that I couldn't have one because I didn't play in the game. She gave me a funny look and went on to the next customer. Later, as we were sitting at the outdoor picnic tables, this same lady came out and gave me a huge ice cream cone. "You're still a winner," she said and walked away. I still choke up a little when I think about it. Fuck that piece of shit coach. I fainted walking up steps on my way to calculus at university. A stranger caught me and put me down on the landing. If it wasn't for him I would have gotten very hurt. I'm a fairly short woman and I've caught both the people who fainted around me. It blew my mind that I was able to respond quickly enough. In both cases it could have been real ugly if I didn't catch them. Glad you had your own ninja. When I was at school, I helped a girl out when she was having a meltdown in the bathroom. A few weeks later she pretended to be my friend who had been waiting to meet me when I was being followed home by 2 guys. We never saw each other outside of those 2 occasions, but I still think about her and hope she's doing okay somewhere out there. Bonds made in the women's bathroom are unbreakable. I broke my foot and was trying to limp my way across campus with crutches in the pouring rain. Someone ran over with their umbrella and walked across campus with me so I wouldn't get rained on. This reminds me of a time in 3rd grade, where I had a really messed up leg after an injury resulting in internal bleeding, caused by my hemophilia. I was limping across the school grounds, when a much older student helped me by picking me up, and carrying me all the way to the other side. So once in high school, I ate at a Mexican restaurant and unknowingly threw away my car keys on my tray when I was done eating. I went and asked a worker if he had cleared them off the table and he said no, but that he had just taken the trash out to the dumpster. I remember going outside and calling my dad to ask if there was a spare and he told me no. So I went back inside feeling humiliated and about to ask if I could look through the dumpster only to see that this man had already dug through the dumpster on my behalf and ended up finding my keys for me. He just went above and beyond and to this day I am so grateful for his help. This story had me shaking my head and looking at my screen like I'm stupid. I can honestly say now that I've been stunned by kindness. These people work terrible jobs. He absolutely did not have to do that. But he did. Now I don't care how much he makes, that right there is a genuine boss. I feel like thanking him on your behalf. Thank you for sharing the story. I transferred in the middle of 1st grade to a school that did ice cream Fridays where you'd pay like 50 or 75 cents for whatever kind and then you'd watch an educational video in the classroom. I was unaware of this when the first Friday rolled around so I didn't have any change and neither did the kid next to me. Normally there would be a few who didn't get ice cream but this day we were the only two. So the teacher called the both of us aside and gave us each the change required to have our ice cream. I think the biggest thing was that she didn't do it in front of the other kids so it looked like we had brought the money all along. It was incredibly kind of her. She was a wonderful teacher outside of that as well. TLDR, I and another student didn't have money for ice cream the day everyone else did. The teacher bought us ice cream so we wouldn't be left out. Edit. I am going to try to reach out to the school to find the teacher and send her an email if possible as a lot of you suggested : Now that's going above and beyond the call of duty. It was very awesome of her. Deleted. A guy I rode the bus with stole my Darth Vader PSP from my bag and tried to have another guy from the bus hold on to it until he sold it. The other guy took it and said no, this isn't right, and returned it to me that day. The thief had watched porn on it, so I had discovered SpSexNet, so guess that's 2 good deeds. I was around 19 years old in my first year of community college. My dad has lost his job and my mom was supported my entire family. We were struggling for a while. I remember being in my night class one day starving. I figured there'd be no dinner so I told myself I'll go straight to bed when I get home and not think about being hungry. When I got home after class, there was a giant box of Costco pizza on the kitchen counter. Apparently one of our neighbors had bought it for us because my dad fixed a part of her fence a few months back. I think it stuck with me because A, I was so fucking hungry, and B, the chances of her bringing food that night of all nights was insane to me. It might sound so stupid but I'll never forget it. Edit. Holy shit. Thanks to everyone who commented with your own similar stories and wished me well. I was not expecting this and I appreciate all the kind words. I am doing well now. Hope you all are too. Love to all. I bet that pizza tasted so good too. After my dad passed away, my depression kicked into overdrive. I went to the doctor and got a prescription for antidepressants. While I was picking up my prescription, I started crying. When I apologized to the pharmacist for crying like a child, the pharmacist said, "You don't have to apologize. You recognize you have a problem and you are trying to fix it. That is a brave thing." It changed my perspective on treating my mental illness. I'm proud of you for getting the help you needed. Hope everything is going well for you. I was paying for groceries at a Trader Joe's and the cashier, F. 60 plus, asks me what I'm doing this weekend. I tell her I'm actually graduating with my master's degree on Saturday. Her eyes light up, beaming smile, and tells me congratulations and to wait right there. She comes back a minute or two later with a small bouquet of roses and tells me to celebrate my accomplishment. Particularly meaningful since my parents could not make the ceremony. I thanked her, gave her a smile and a hug, and never saw her again. My daughter ran away from home a year and a half ago. She was home and gone many times. During those months I was so sad and sometimes couldn't keep it together long enough to make it through shopping without breaking down. I live right by a Trader Joe's and go in there often. They, too, gave me flowers on a few occasions when they saw me desperately sad. It was the only bright spot that kept me going at times. I went to the customer service counter a year later and told the manager how much it meant to me. My daughter still doesn't live at home, but things are better. When coronavirus became bad in our area, I sewed masks for all the employees. I missed my train to go home for Christmas from uni due to a crash near the station. I was completely broke and knew I wouldn't be able to afford another ticket. Life just got on top of me knowing I'd have to spend Christmas alone in my shitty student house and not being about to see my granddad who was in rapidly declining health. I was bawling my eyes out on the platform when a janitor appeared out of a hidden stockroom under a stairwell and brought me some tissues. He found out why I was so upset and said leave it to me. Took me to the customer service desk and got them to reissue me a ticket for the next train home. I was so thankful I started bawling again and he went on his way. Then just before I was about to get my train he found me on the platform and gave me some snacks and a can of Coke, and it's just the nicest thing anyone's ever done for it. Wow, I feel like I'm walking through a museum and every single story of kindness I read looks like a masterpiece painted by the most skilled craftsman. It's unreal how much beauty there is in these simple acts of kindness. Thank you so much for sharing this story. I had a coworker about 10 years ago. We became work friends, but he was moving to another state. So on his last day, he brought and gave me an iPod Nano, back when they were fairly new, completely filled with different music that we had talked about or listened to together. No one had ever done something that thoughtful for me before. I could have cried. If you're out there, Gabe, that's something that I will always remember. After the recessions and our house's foreclosure, my family and I were homeless during the summer between my 4th and 5th grade in school. When school started back up, I went to live with some family friends who clothed, fed and loved me as one of their own. Not only that, a few weeks before moving in with them, one of my mom's co-workers heard about our homelessness and secretly organized a fundraiser for my parents out of the state park they were living in. Along with about $1,000, they got me a book bag filled to the brim with all the school supplies I would need for the year. Still brings me to tears thinking about. I just graduated high school this May, and I'll never forget it. I worked in Bridal for 6 years. Which means I was berated by hormonal bridezillas nearly 5 days a week for 6 years. After one particularly awful day at work, I decided to get Chipotle for dinner. I was defeated and exhausted. The girl making my burrito bowl genuinely asked me how I was doing and I nearly lost it. She was the only person to be kind to me all day. I held back tears during my entire transaction. That was about 3 years ago and I think about her kindness often. Please be kind to retail and food workers. Once in high school I was ordering a burrito at Chipotle. The woman assembling my burrito asked if I wanted guacamole. I asked how much it cost. She said $1. I hesitated for a while, trying to decide if guacamole was worth $1 to me, and eventually said no. When she thought I wasn't looking, out of the corner of my eye I saw her add a scoop of guacamole to the burrito. She probably thought I couldn't afford the guac, which wasn't exactly the case, but it still warmed my heart. When I was little I was waiting for my aunt in a supermarket. Whenever someone exited the supermarket the doors were automatic, so every time someone left I stood by the doors and pretended to magically open the doors. One person said thank you. I want to be like that person. I burnt my hand pretty bad at work. I was dropped off at an urgent care by a co-worker. I was sobbing, barely able to talk because of the pain. The receptionist was extremely rude to me. I had an older man who was waiting on his wife come help me with everything. Taking my wallet out of my purse for me. I had to wait a while before I was seen. He sat next to me. Told me little funny stories about his grandkids. He even had me hold his hand and squeeze it tight to try to take my mind away from the pain. When I was finally called back, he wished me well. I think about him sometimes. He didn't have to do that, but he saw that I was in pain and wanted to help. Edit spelling. I was in a very abusive relationship at 19 that I wasn't fully aware of at the time, and living with the guy. I'm at work and realize I don't have any money for food and was just asked by management to stay late, so I called my BF and told him I had an unopened check waiting for me at home and asked if he would bring it to me at work so I could cash it and get some food on my break. He was unemployed at the time, so it didn't seem like a big deal to me, but he said he was out with friends, drunk at a bar, and wouldn't leave, so I would just have to figure it out. This was before Venmo and Cash App, so I couldn't ask him to send me money either. I was so frustrated and complaining to coworker about what a jerk he was, and a woman overheard my story and offered to buy my lunch. I pleaded with her not to give me any money because I didn't want to sound like I was scamming or anything. You procrastinated 2112 buying me a pizza when I was down and out. Edit. Whoever gave me silver. Thank you so much. But it's him that deserves it. Down, but never out. I told my coworker I just really missed home, and most of all, a home cooked meal. I was 19 and moved away from home for the first time to a big city for a job opportunity. I'd never been away from my mom before, or even been alone for longer than like 2 weeks. I could cook basically nothing, and everything I did was just missing something, so mostly lived off takeout and microwave meals, which I was starting to get really sick of. I just wanted a nice meal made with love and fresh ingredients. Anyway, I told my coworker that, and the next day she came in with 5 homemade meals in containers for me to eat for the next week. The day before, she conjured up a conversation about allergies, which I didn't even think was anything more than a usual conversation, until the next day. It made me cry, and she didn't understand why I was so overwhelmed and surprised, because it was just something she did every day but for her own kids. I don't think I will ever forget it. It was truly just so sweet, and the meals were so good, so comforting. Truly tasted like they were just made by the hands of loving parent. I was working in a medical field, and after the course of a few days, I worked with 4 members of this family. Starting with the dad, who was just an awesome human. Then the next day he came in with his son. Later that afternoon, he came back in with his son again, for his daughter's apt. I genuinely fell in love with this family more and more after each member I met. The father, son, daughter attended the mother's appointment with her the next day. At this point, I was considering proposing to the son, as I wanted to be a part of this amazing, hilarious, loving family. I informed them I regretted I wouldn't be there when they came back in 2 weeks, as I was moving on to a different position. They came back an hour later with a nothing but cake, with the sweetest card and an inside joke written on the outside of the cake box. It made me cry. My family life has always sucked, and meeting T. Edit. Thank you kindly for the award. Did you propose? One of my first suicide attempts, I ended up in the ER for a while. I felt hopeless and frustrated that I was still alive. My father and sister were arguing outside, blaming each other for my attempt. A nurse saw my distress and tried to talk to me to sympathize. She later gave me a little tissue box with kind words of encouragement, and I have it on my bookshelf. Every time I see it, it makes me smile. I don't remember her name, but that was one of the reasons I decided to stay a little longer. I was going to be late for my flight out of London and I couldn't miss it. I really needed to get home. I couldn't afford a taxi as I spent my last money on the ticket. Random young Muslim dude gave me the cab fare and $20 and said, "You remind me of my mother back home, who I miss very much." He hugged me and left. This was at 4 AM. I was baffled. The guy's an angel. Also posted on Twitter I didn't have any money for my insulin that month and a kind older lady asked what kind I used. I told her and she said, "My husband passed away and had 5 bottles of that kind left. I will mail them to you." And X200B. God bless both these people for their kindness. I was in Nick taking a lunch break at a job I absolutely hated. I was sitting eating alone at a MCD's and after about 15 minutes this man in his 40s or 50s, I'm a 28 years old male at the time, goes up to me and says something like, "Hey man, you look really sad. Things will get better," and just shook my hand. Takes a lot for one adult man to offer that up to another strange man. Really cheered me up. Edit. Wow, woke up to this blowing up. Most upvoted comment yet and thanks for the golden awards. Moments like that can be so powerful. I had a friend invite me out to dinner once and when I arrived, she just hugged me. I broke down and cried. I'd been struggling with depression for so long and nobody close to me had noticed, but this couple I'd met on holiday and seen a few times since had seen something and took the initiative to ask, "Are you okay?" without having to ask. I think I've told this story before, but years ago I had an norovirus and was so sick I thought I was going to die. My dad took me to urgent care and the first doctor that saw me acted like I was being dramatic and gave me a pill to take. I couldn't even keep a sip of water down to take the freaking pill. Went back and insisted on seeing a different doctor. In walks this tiny Muslim woman and the first thing she does is take my face in her hands and say, "Oh you poor thing." I immediately started to cry. She gave me some shot in the hip and suppositories and I immediately started feeling better. I will never forget her kindness. When I was a lad, about 14 or 15, I was rushing home to make my curfew. My bike wheel slipped sideways and I crashed my bike quite badly and messed myself up a bit. My wedding tackle got the full crossbar treatment. I gashed my elbow and took a blow to the head. These were the days before helmets. A random couple picked me up and collected up my bike, went to a phone box and called a taxi for me. Then paid for the taxi to take me the remaining 5 miles or so home. My parents went from "What times do you call this?" to "You're going to hospital in a heartbeat." Turns out my injuries weren't too bad, but without random strangers, I've no idea how long I'd have been say at the side of the road before I started the walk home. Thank you, random strangers. This is the first time I've heard wedding tackle. I was bullied at school, quite relentlessly. Anyway, there was a cool kid called Kane. He was like captain of the football team kind of guy. One day, he stepped in, he said stop, and that one word changed my school life so much. My first semester in college was horrible. I was, and still am, in a deep depression. One day I was walking home from school and a guy running by said, "I like your shirt." It was that simple. I didn't know him, and I didn't care at that moment. It made me feel happy because I got a genuine compliment. When I get compliments from friends or family, I often feel like they are giving me them because they are obligated to. This guy didn't have to, so it felt real. Little thoughts like that often go unspoken and it's a shame. I always make an effort to compliment someone and say those nice thoughts out loud because, exactly like your story, you never know who needs a smile and whose day you'll turn around simply by expressing a small kindness. I hope your depression gets better. It's a hard illness. I struggle with it too. You're not alone. I had a troubled home life as a young man. The summer before grade 9, I was